Very interesting. And welcome to Eyes on Carnivore. My name is Sean. Today, I want to talk a bit about saturated fat because it's in the news, and boy, I'm happy about this. RFK and his team are putting together some changes with the US food guidelines. The guidelines which basically tells the entire world what to eat, and it needs changing because it's been based upon lies for many, many years. And there's a lot of people that are not happy about it. I have been reading in the newspaper various articles that, I don't know, they're going one way or the another. You know, can you eat fat or can you not eat fat? I think we should just discuss this a little bit further. Let's find out more. Today we're diving deep into the history and science of saturated fat, why the so-called diet heart hypothesis led us astray for decades, and what recent changes in health guidelines might mean for the future of nutrition. Make sure to check the description for links to references and studies I'll mention throughout this video. For more than 50 years, saturated fat has been demonized. We were told that eating butter, eggs and meat would clog our arteries, raise our cholesterol, and ultimately kill us. Low-fat diets became the cornerstone of public health advice in the US, shaping not only what people ate at home but also in schools, hospitals, and even the military. The evidence supporting that advice was weak at best. Epidemiological studies, which follow large groups of people over time, often found correlations between high saturated fat intake and heart disease. But correlation does not equal causation. Most of these studies couldn't account for the fact that saturated fat from processed foods is vastly different from saturated fat in whole, natural foods like meat, eggs, and dairy. The story gets even more fascinating when you look back at the actual studies. For decades, the public was unaware that some of the most critical research was buried or simply never published. One example is the Minnesota Coronary experiment conducted between 1968 and 1973. The study replaced saturated fats in participants' diets with vegetable oils, expecting a decrease in heart disease. The results, however, showed no significant benefit. After a re-evaluation in 2016 by BMJ, the raw data showed higher mortality among those with the greatest reduction in saturated fat. Shockingly, these findings were originally hidden from the public for decades. You can check the study in the description below. Multiple meta-analyses since then, including one published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology in 2020, have found that saturated fat from whole foods is not associated with cardiovascular disease. They conclude with the following: the long-standing bias against foods rich in saturated fats should be replaced with a view toward recommending diets consisting of healthy foods. What steps could shift the bias? And yet, despite clear evidence like this, natural fats continue to be demonized. It raises an important question. If the science no longer supports the fear of saturated fat, why does the narrative persist? Looking back 10 years from this study, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition meta-analysis confirmed that replacing saturated fats with carbohydrates doesn't improve cardiovascular outcomes. Furthermore, they concluded that there is no clear link to saturated fats and cardiovascular disease, and this was over a decade ago. What the f***? Here's something the average person doesn't know. When you consume excess carbohydrates, your body converts the surplus glucose into saturated fat for storage through a process called de novo lipogenesis. This happens every time your blood glucose exceeds roughly 4 milligrams per deciliter, or about 1 teaspoon in your bloodstream. Anything above that is considered toxic and must be either stored as glycogen or converted into saturated fat. This means that the saturated fat you eat isn't the only source of fat in your body. Overeating carbs produces your own saturated fat, which is far more damaging than fat from whole foods like meat, eggs, or dairy. This is a critical concept in understanding why the low-fat, high-carb dietary guidelines actually contributed to the metabolic epidemics we see today: diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. The US is finally revisiting these outdated guidelines. Low-fat recommendations are slowly being replaced with nuanced advice that recognises the safety and even benefits of saturated fat from whole foods. Other countries, including Australia, tend to follow US guidance closely, so changes in American policy are likely to ripple across the globe. This shift could impact institutions that rely on government dietary guidelines. Schools, hospitals, and defence services may start incorporating higher fat, lower carb meals. For those of us advocating for evidence-based nutrition, this is a welcome change. Low-carb approaches to diet can drastically improve metabolic health, reduce inflammation, and improve glycemic control, factors that strongly reduce the risk of chronic disease.
All right, RFK is saying eat more saturated fat is driving the so-called health experts crazy. You may have seen recent headlines like this one saying Robert F. Kennedy urges people to eat more saturated fat.
So you all know this is the food pyramid. This is basically our dietary guidelines. And so you can see the big bottom slab of bread and grains, and then there's fats and oils, which are up in the teeny tiny tip.
The food pyramid wasn't the sole cause of today's chronic disease crisis, but it undeniably shaped what the world's dinner plates began to look like. It normalised carb-heavy meals, encouraged processed grains and vegetable oils, and indirectly fueled the rise of fast food, now a daily option for millions, especially in lower socio-economic groups. Over the last 45 years, these environmental and cultural shifts have completely reshaped the human diet, and with it, our health. Now let's be clear, saturated fat isn't an unlimited free pass to eat anything in any quantity. Overconsumption, even of whole foods, can lead to weight gain. Appetite is naturally suppressed for many people on a high-fat diet, but not for everyone. From my personal experience on a carnivore diet, satiety signals are strong, and I know when to stop eating. Physical activity is also a key part of the equation. Saturated fat provides energy that fuels an active lifestyle. If you remain sedentary, excessive fat intake, regardless of source, can contribute to metabolic dysfunction. So what's the takeaway? Saturated fat from whole foods is not inherently harmful. Many people have been misled for decades due to flawed studies, hidden data, and a misguided focus on low-fat, high-carb diets. Furthermore, I think it's highly irresponsible of governments to subsidise an improper diet to the public. The upcoming changes in dietary guidelines are a step in the right direction. But let's be honest, most of the population is already metabolically broken from decades of poor dieting. For significant health improvements, a more targeted approach, such as a carnivore-style diet or low-carb, high-fat diet, may be necessary to restore metabolic health, reverse chronic disease, and reclaim energy and vitality. Remember to check the description for links to all studies and references mentioned in this video. Well, I've learned something, and I hope you did too. And if you enjoyed the content, please like, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, make it ring a ding ding. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.